Hello and welcome everyone. Excited to have you joining us today for the next in our series on adaptive leadership, and specifically on sort of the topic of artificial intelligence and how that relates to leadership in today's context. Really excited to be joined today by Geoff Woods, who is the author of The AI-Driven Leader. Geoff is one of those people who has been thinking about how artificial intelligence impacts leadership and impacts our ability to be strategic. For quite a while now, right? So one of the early adopters on this topic, and so we're really fortunate to have him here to share some of his great insights around how to use AI more effectively. We're going to talk about some of the value gap that we've talked about in the past, but we're also going to talk about how AI really helps you as an individual be a better leader. So Geoff, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Geoff.
Excellent. As always, before we get to the fun part, we do have to get some housekeeping out of the way.
Sure.
So we're going to use Q&A. So folks, please do use the Q&A function in Zoom to submit any questions you have. We'll try at the end to get to as many of those as we can. And those that we don't, as always, we will send out some materials after the webinar and you'll be able to see some of the answers there. We're also probably going to put up slides from time to time and take them down. So don't worry if the slides disappear for you. That's intentional. It's not because you've lost a screen. So that's all right if you see the slides come up and down. And then finally, we're going to record this webinar, so we will share the recording afterwards as well. So feel free to revisit the webinar if you're on, or if you have colleagues who can join. Certainly share that with them as well. Maybe just before we jump into the conversation, I wanted to, because I know we've got a lot of folks who are joining us maybe for the first time. So just to put this in context, we started this webinar series because we wanted to explore the fast changing context around us, the level of uncertainty, the level of disruption, and what that means and the implications for individuals, teams, and organizations, and how you might lead in that more disrupted environment. And then, of course, over the last year and a half, AI has been the biggest disruptor in most organizations, right? It's been the biggest disruptor for most people as they think about what they need to do differently. And so that's why the last few webinars, we've decided to go deeper on the subject of artificial intelligence, its implications for organizations and for leaders, and hence sort of this discussion and why this is so important for us as Kotter as we think about how to most effectively help individuals and organizations with change leadership, but then of course also for our audience. What we'd like to do, just to get a sense of where people are in their AI journey, is just start with a couple of polls. So in a second, you're going to see a question pop up, and what I'd ask our audience to do, you're going to select one answer. So select the answer that feels most right for you for that question, and it'll help Geoff and I as we have our conversation to know sort of where people are with their AI journey. So hopefully that poll should be popping up in a second. All right, there you go. That's your first question, which is really just around where you are in the AI journey. So pick the one that feels most right for you. All right. We'll give that a couple of minutes to get, or a couple of seconds, maybe not a couple of minutes, so we'll be here for a while to get answers coming in. And we've been asking this question now of various leadership groups. And yeah, your answers are fairly reflective, right? A bit of a spread. And in terms of the real tangible ROI, fairly low percentages at the moment. And that's part of why we're having these kinds of discussions. All right, great. That's helpful to see. I think we've got another question that should be popping up now, and then we'll get to it. All right, there we go. And this is really around barriers, right? So for those of you who didn't say we're seeing tremendous return on investment from our AI pilots, what do you think is getting in the way, right? What's getting in the way of both the scaling of artificial intelligence across, but then also the value generation? And I'm realizing we don't have an other. So, there might be a few people who are going, hey, it's not none of these, right? It's something else. but let's see what folks think. Okay. All right. Excellent. Bit of a spread across, and we're going to touch on some of this, right? We're going to touch on some of these barriers and how to overcome some of these in our discussion. Fantastic. So thank you for that. Very useful for us to collect that data. Um, Geoff, I'd love to start just by understanding a little bit of what got you to write the AI-driven leader, because, like I said, it was early in the
Yeah.
conversation around AI.
It My senior year of college, I'm doing an internship. I remember sitting down with the CEO asking him what job he thought I should get after school. And he said, "Geoff, you're asking the wrong question. You really should be asking, what are the skills I can master that are so valuable, they'll serve me no matter where I go."
Mm,
That quote is more relevant today than ever. Um, if we rewind a little bit, I'm a chief growth officer for a big public company out of India called Jindal Steel. And it was the morning of our offsite that I had organized where I pulled in the C suite from every operating company we owned into Delhi, where we were casting a vision for the future of leadership. It's December of 22. And we're at the breakfast, and one of my colleagues leans over and says, "Hey, have you heard of ChatGPT?" I said, "No." It had been literally 2 weeks out. And when he showed me how he used it, Gaurav, I saw the next skill.
mm,
And at the same time, I thought all the things most of us thought, which is I'm busy, I'll get to it later. I'll delegate it to IT. I'll hire a consultant to do it for us. But something in my heart said, I think this is a skill that's worth mastering. So I just made a commitment. I'm going to start using it once a day, every day, and realized very quickly I was using it for all the things that didn't matter. I was
mm.
using it to write a better email or using it to be a better search engine. Last time I checked, none of us got promoted to the levels that we're at in our organizations because we wrote the best emails in the company, meaning I was using it to major in the minors. And I found myself wondering, what would it look like to major in the majors? And that's when
Right.
I came back to this belief that I believe your ability to think strategically is the
Hmm.
difference between growing your business or going out of business. And one of my core skills is the ability to ask leaders the right questions to unlock new levels of growth. I very quickly stopped asking AI questions and started turning the tables and engaging AI as a thought partner to ask me questions to elevate my strategic thinking and my leadership. When I showed the chairman of the board how I was using it for strategy instead of tactics, he put me in charge of AI for the company.
Hmm.
One problem, I know nothing about AI, but I partnered with Google, learned a lot about AI. And as we're driving it through the company, I realized the tech is not the difference that makes the difference.
Yeah.
It's the people. You got to win the hearts and minds of people and get them to buy in, which is where the changed leadership comes in. And at the time, we're talking late 23. No one is talking about the people. They're only focused on tech. And so I resigned. I said, I'm going to write a book about this. I'm gonna focus on the AI driven leader, and the AI driven leader is now the number one book in the world for AI. And I've built a company called AI Leadership, where we help companies solve what we see are the three biggest problems with AI adoption right now. Number one is the leadership gap. Every
Hmm.
C-suite is mandating the use of AI, but they're not using it themselves.
Hmm.
That's not leadership, that's hypocrisy. We're world class at galvanizing the C suite to become AI driven leaders. Then there's the alignment gap because people will not embrace a technology they are afraid of. And we are really good at restructuring how you drive alignment across a company with AI at the center of it. And then three is the execution gap. You can focus this technology on 80% of the use cases. They're only going to drive 20% of the results. We are really good at figuring out what are those 20% use cases that actually move the enterprise value. And proof of that is we moved the market cap at Jindal from 750 million to 12 billion in 4 years.
Mm, mm. That's impressive. There's about four different directions we could go in this conversation just based on what you've said, but maybe where I'd like to start. So, one of the things that we've been doing a lot of thinking about and talking to executives about is the idea of how do you see AI within your strategy, right? Because I remember back in the early 2000s talking to manufacturing leaders at the time, and everybody had an outsourcing strategy, right? Everybody said, "I've got an outsourcing strategy," and I'm seeing the same thing now with AI. People go, "Well, what's your AI strategy?" Now, not that everybody has one yet, but that's the question people are
Yep.
asking. And I think you would agree with this. I think it's the wrong question, right?
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter what your AI strategy is. What matters is how does AI really enable what you're trying to do as a business and the competitive advantage that you're trying to create through your strategy, right?
Yes. You
So, so
nailed it.
when, so when I read your book and I sort of, you start to you start to talk about AI as a strategic thought partner, I'd love to sort of maybe unpack that a little bit in terms of why do you why did you get to the point of, oh, I've got to get AI to ask me questions to make me a better leader? Like, why did you see that as the helpful use of AI?
Because my whole background is I had built a consulting company where we were really good at driving strategic planning and execution. The core skill that I had that moved the market cap of a lot of companies was asking them the right questions to unlock new levels of growth. I know if I can ask you the right question, I can shift how you think. That'll shift how you act. That'll shift the results that you get. And I also know that it's really tough to read the label when you're inside the box.
Hmm.
And everybody's in their own box right now, their own perspective. And AI is world class at asking questions if you structure the prompt correctly, which we can get to. So that's why I started there, and
Yeah.
it proved to be so valuable. I mean, one of the first, I have a very simple prompt framework called CRIT.
Hmm.
I'll show you guys it on a slide so that you can see the visual. This is probably the most important slide that I'm going to show you today. I would absolutely take a screenshot of this. It stands for context, role, interview, task. If you just start talking to AI through this framework, it'll take you to top 1% of people globally. I remember sitting down with the chairman and I wrote a crit in front of him where I said, context attaches our annual strategic plan. And I literally dragged and dropped the business plan of our company into the context section in a secure environment of AI. Role. Your role is to act as an aggressive, growth minded board member with deep expertise in the steel industry, vertically integrated from distribution to mining. Interview me. Ask me one question at a time, up to 5 questions to gain deeper context about where our plan is insufficient to deliver results. Then your task is to tell me all the changes we need to make in the next 30 days so we make sure we deliver on our next earnings call. I sent that prompt and it read the business plan through the lens of that aggressive growth minded board member with that level of expertise. And it started asking extraordinarily sharp questions that pulled deeper context out of our head and then laid out a roadmap of where our plan was insufficient and the gaps that we needed to fill in the next 30 days. I did that with ChatGPT. Like, that's mind blowing. So that for me was early use of it to realize, okay, you can use this to write a better email, or you can use this to bulletproof your execution that delivers billions in market cap. Same tool. The difference
Yeah.
that makes the difference is the leader who wields it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's worth maybe a couple of minutes on this, right? So this you've mentioned it a couple of times that hey, it's not about writing the better email. It's about, and I think that's one of the reasons why we see that gap in the data, the survey we did at the start, which by the way, we've done that data collection now for over 500 leaders, and what we're seeing is that's those numbers are pretty consistent, right? You're seeing anywhere between 3 and 10% at most in terms of return, and part of that is because you can write a better email, and if everybody starts to write better emails, everybody starts to do something slightly better, it's not actually creating a competitive advantage, it's not actually creating value within your business. And so one of the shifts that I think we've all got to make if we're going to start to see the value from AI is actually finding the best places to utilize it, right? The top priorities in the organization, the things that are going to move the needle, and then using it in a way that allows you to move the needle on that. And I know you've
Yeah.
talked about sort of this idea of focusing on the 20%, right?
Yes.
And so maybe that's a good place to go next is
Yeah.
just how are you helping leaders do that? How are you helping leaders focus on the top 20%?
So first, I mean, this is 80-20 rule. 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. And this is a law like gravity. It might be 90-10 or whatever, but the minority of what we do as an organization drives the majority of the results. And the minority of what you do as an individual drives the majority of the impact toward the company. The problem is most people are actually pretty bad at identifying and staying focused on the 20%. They wake up, check this bad boy, They check email, they get ready, they show up to the office, whether at home or physical office, and they check email until they have to go to their first meeting. They get out of the meeting, they have 5 minutes, so they check email or Slack or Teams. And then somebody says, hey, you got a minute? And because you're a team player, you say, sure. I'm curious how many of you have ever gotten to the end of the day and thought, oh, I was so busy. What did I get done?
Mhm.
That is normal. So first is this just idea that most of what people are doing is reacting to the 80%, not truly focused on the 20% of their role that is directly in alignment with company goals. So for me, when I approach AI, I do not even think about how do I augment or automate the 80% faster because it doesn't matter. I go straight to the 20% that's going to drive 80% of the results. And for most leaders, let's just start with strategic thinking and decision making. If we can harness this technology to ask us better questions, to help us think more strategically or make faster, smarter decisions, that has a huge impact inside the company. It also tends to become this gateway skill. Because what I have found is that imagine if your entire life you have only seen color or black and white, and I asked you to describe color. You can't do it. And this is what's happening. This is the leadership gap. You've got executives in the company who are saying, we got to be AI driven when they are not themselves. They are still living in black and white, yet they're mandating how to use this to drive operational efficiency or to take cost out of the business or to restructure the company, or we need to drive this into our product or service to create a competitive advantage when they are not leading from experience. You have to transform the leader before you can transform the organization. And so that's really why it starts
Yeah.
there.
And that's really exciting for me because, I mentioned at the sort of tee up, right? This whole webinar series essentially started from this idea of we're operating in an environment that's very different than it was 10 years ago. It's a
Yeah.
much more uncertain, much faster paced environment. Coming with sort of almost synonymous with uncertainty is the fact that you don't have all the information, right? Making decisions is getting harder. Being able to make not even good decisions, that's not even being able to make a decision and move fast is becoming harder and harder because you go, well, I don't have all the information. I don't know how this is going to change. I don't know how that is going to change. And so I think when you start talking about AI as a tool to help leaders who are getting stuck in this sort of I don't want to sort of get too far out there, but who are getting a little bit stuck on the I'm not being able to move fast because I am waiting for more information. This idea of AI as something that can ask me questions or AI as something that can help me think more strategically, I think can help move from this point of being, stuck in a analysis paralysis sort of mode to a let's move and let's figure out where we're going mode.
Yeah. Can I share a real world use case on this?
Of course.
So I'll share some slides because it illustrates it really well. Anytime I get into a room with a group of leaders, my initial question is the same, which is what are the biggest problems that you are facing in your company, period? That if we could just solve them, it unlocks a new level of growth. The question itself is strategic. For a guy who wrote a book about AI, I really don't care about AI because AI adoption is none of our goals. It is not technology first, strategy second. It is strategy first, technology second. One CEO looks at me and goes, I have a really big problem. I run a manufacturing company here in the US. I leased all this capital equipment from a company in Japan, but since doing so, things have really shifted in the market. The debt structure is now killing us. We're going to go bankrupt if we can't get it restructured. I ask him, what's he done? He goes, I feel like we tried everything. And he lists 5 very specific strategies they have deployed in detail. And he goes, Geoff, none of this has worked because the company that owns the debt in Japan, it's gone all the way to the board. They are refusing to restructure the debt because they think they'll lose face in Japanese society. I have no next steps. We are going bankrupt unless you think AI can help. If you are asking what's the right AI use case, are you asking the right question? Because that is a solution in search of a problem. That is tech first, strategy second. I go straight to what are the biggest problems that you are facing? That if we solve them, it unlocks a new level of growth and realizing that that is the AI use case. And how do you do it? That's where crit comes in. You give AI lots of context about the situation. You assign it a role where you ask it to act as a certain type of expert to then interview you to gather deeper context out of your head so it can then accomplish a task. Here is the actual crit I wrote for the CEO. Context. I'm a manufacturing CEO. I leased all this capital equipment from a company in Japan. Things have shifted in the market. The debt is now killing us. We're going to go bankrupt if we don't get it restructured. We feel like we've tried everything. And I listed all 5 strategies. None of it has worked because this is a public company in Japan. The board is refusing to restructure the debt because they think they'll lose face in Japanese society. I have no alternatives and feel we're going out of business. Role. Your role is to act as an investment banker with deep expertise in restructuring debt. Interview me. Ask me 1 question at a time, up to 3 questions to gain deeper context. Then your task is to generate 5 non-obvious strategies I could deploy to get the board to restructure the debt. Pop quiz. How many books do you think you have read in your entire life? Do they have the ability to put that into a chat, Gaurav?
Uh, I'm not sure that the
Q&A.
chat is enabled, so we may not be able to see that
That's
from.
fine. Well, here's the point. Whether it's 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000. I want you to think of every book you have ever picked up or downloaded, every word you have ever consumed. What percent of that collective knowledge can you recall and apply right now? If you're like most leaders, the answer is very little. And look at how well you've done in your life based on your ability to recall and apply the minority of the information you've learned, which is the minority of the information in the world. That's us as humans. Now let's talk about AI. AI has been trained on about 500 million books worth of data. How long, Gaurav, do you think it took it to read through 500 million books? Think what that even looks like. To understand how an investment banker with deep expertise in restructuring debt, who also knew 2,000 years of Japanese culture and history, would think, act, turn the tables, and ask the first question. Under a second. Here's the question it asked. Do you have any relationships with any other executives in Japan that the board would respect? I look straight at the CEO and he goes, whoa, I would have never asked that question. Oh my gosh, I do. And he gives that context back to AI, which dynamically unlocked 2 sequential questions of that magnitude. And then it turns the tables and says, here's your 5 non-obvious strategies. Number 1 on the list, the Saving Face Consortium. It said, you have enough relationships with all the right people in Japan. Why don't you approach them to acquire your debt? Give them really favorable terms. Your debt will get restructured. Your board will save face. I turn and I look at him, Gaurav. He's actually holding back tears. And he vulnerably turns to everybody else in the room and admits, I have not slept in 90 days. I've been making peace with the fact that we are going out of business, but in less than 10 minutes, I got hope.
Yeah.
This saved his company. That was a 10-minute use case with ChatGPT.
You know what I really love about that story is that by flipping it into the ask me questions mode, you also, and I know this isn't the primary reason, but you also get around one of the big criticisms people have, right? Which is, how do I know that what I'm getting from AI is sensible? Well, you sort of know because you're the one who is answering the questions, right?
Yeah.
So not all it's doing, it's very important what it's doing, but it's getting you to think differently. It's getting you to ask yourself different questions, right? And so it also gets around this idea of, well, I don't know if I can trust. You don't have to trust AI, right? All you have to do is trust that the question is a sensible question to answer, and that gets
Yeah.
you a lot of the value. I mean, yeah, sure. I know at the end it also gave you some strategies which are also helpful, but even just that first part, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's to me that's sort of this. And by the way, when I read your book, the thing I started to do differently right away was actually this thing around asking it to ask you questions, sort of thing, which changes massively how effective AI can be for you.
Totally. Yeah, it's a game changer. I mean, literally, when we'll get brought in to do training for the executive teams, and we're talking mid-market to the biggest companies in the world. And I will look straight at the CEO and say, what is the biggest problem that you are facing right now? That if we can solve it, will unlock a huge level of growth. We've had companies that have given us problems. If we can solve them, would drive billions in impact. and in 20 to 30 minutes, either solve it or massively move the ball with Copilot or ChatGPT. I mean, and that's the real value of if we are the thought leader. Humans, we're the thought leader. We're in the driver's seat, but AI is a thought partner. And if we can engage AI by pulling in the right data and as thought leader, giving it the right context, articulating the role, having it interview us, pointing it at the right task, then it can harness this massive processing power and all the data it has from the ether, plus the data it has within our company that we've granted access to ask the sharpest questions to unlock more context to then drive very clear results.
And the other part of this is the behavior change it starts to drive, right? Because so again, back to our sort of context of uncertainty and lack of information, you go, well, how do you operate in that environment? You don't operate by being more command and control, which is what sometimes people think, right? They think, well, people don't have answers. I, as the leader, have to be the one to give everybody the answers. The winning strategy is no, you actually do more dispersed decision making because the people closest to the signals are the ones who can answer, who have the best answers, right? And so the behavior change that comes with this is I'm no longer being the one who is providing all of the questions and all of the answers. Yes, it might start with, AI as my thought partner, but it's the same philosophy to say, get out to other people, right? Get other people to start to provide you with more input as well. And so I think that it fits very nicely from my perspective with what I think is so important for leaders in this environment, which is more dispersed decision making and action.
Can I share another real world example? This will
I
this
love
will
real world
really
example.
expand people's minds. Marianella is my former executive assistant. Keyword former. She still works for me now. 4 months into her job, she is crushing it. She's 10 out of 10 on everything, which means time to promote her, time to give her a bigger role. And so I sat down with her and I said to her something very simple, which is I want you to cast a vision for how you think you can bring 10 times to 100 times more value to the company. I want you to use AI. I want you to write crit. I want you to have it help you identify what are your greatest strengths that you may or may not be using and come back with your vision. Now, let's be clear. Before working with me, she knew how to spell AI. That was it. She had literally never used any AI tool. She read the book, she read the AI Driven Leader, and I taught her how to write crit. That was it. I've already taught you how to write crit. You have the same foundation overall. But I did something different. Instead of doing what traditional leaders would do, which is say, it's time to promote you. Here's your new title. Here's your new job description. Fit into this box as though I know what's the best use of her, which is ignorant. I put her in the driver's seat. I gave her agency because authorship is ownership. She comes back to me the next week and she goes, okay, I'm ready. I ask her with what? She goes, my vision. I go, oh, let's hear it. And she goes, okay, so based on my strengths, here's the 20% things I'm currently doing that I need to double down on. This will bring 10 times more value. But also based on my strengths, here's the things I'm not doing that I should really start doing. They're going to bring 10 times more value. But if I double down in these two categories, here's all the things I'm going to have to stop doing, because I'm going to have to free myself up. I've segmented those things into 3 groups. Here's the things we should just stop doing. They do not matter. They're distractions. Here's the things I think we can use AI to augment or automate so they still get done, just not by a human. And here's the things we still need a person to do. Based on that, here's the job description for my replacement. Here's their 20% priorities, their 90-day onboarding plan, the research on compensation. I recommend we pay them X. Do I have your approval? I'm blown away. And I'm celebrating her. I'm congratulating with her. And she goes, I appreciate that, but I'm not done yet. That was for me to bring 10 times more value. That's not what you asked, Geoff. You asked for a vision for 10 times to 100 times more value. I sit back and I'm going, oh my gosh, is it Christmas? I can't wait. And she goes, here's my realization. I can't bring 100 times more value unless I make you 100 times more valuable. Here's a prompt I've architected to interview you, Geoff, to identify how you can bring 100 times more value. Gaurav, I go, I can't wait to do this. And she goes, good, you'll do it now. I'll wait. And she literally waited on Zoom. While AI interviews me for about 20 minutes, spits out this roadmap, spits out a list of rules that she would have to embed in the company to transform my time allocation. I tell her, this is the most valuable prompt I've ever done. She goes, yeah, I appreciate that, but we have a problem. You love to break the rules. I'll put this in place, but you're going to wiggle your way out of every single one of these. I know you, Geoff, which is why I've created one more prompt that AI is going to interview you to create a defense process. So if you ever want to break one of these rules, you're going to have to go through AI first. And I did it right then and there. This is what my calendar used to look like. Here's what my calendar now looks like. She went from being my executive assistant, where her job was three things: check my email, manage my calendar, do my 80%, to now being our executive multiplier. Her job is three things: make me 100 times more valuable, literally, run all of our scopes for Latin America for our advisory practice, and build all of our internal systems that are AI driven for culture and business execution. You tell me, is she at least 10 times more valuable than me? You better believe it. But now she's doing that with her people, where she's having her admin people in Claude Cowork and Claude Code, where they're building systems to turn their 20% strengths into superpowers, and they're augmenting the 80%. She did that without me even giving her direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I want to fly up to 10,000 feet. Your job as a leader is not to become an AI expert, but it is to become an AI-driven leader, meaning you personally use this yourself to elevate how you think and how you act, because that will shift vision, that will shift strategy, and now you're leading from a place of credibility where you can look at your version of a Marianella, and instead of handing them a job description, you go, use AI. You tell me how you can bring more value. And now you really start to give agency and drive this through the company.
Yeah, no, great. So let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about scaling this, right? Because you're sort of going there in your conversation. I mean, there is the getting leadership teams to start to use AI to get their, to be better leaders, essentially, right? To be better
Yeah.
strategic leaders. And then there is okay, now how do we get the rest of the organization to start to do this in the same way especially given some of the anxiety that people have around AI use? Because, one of the things, well, okay, well, if I'm doing 10 times more, is there 10 times more to do? And what happens
Yes,
when you're doing 10 times
always
more and there are
is.
other people, right? So how have you thought through the sort of the scaling aspect of this, the getting it out to everyone in the organization, so it isn't just and I say leader now positionally, right? Which is not
Yeah.
how I think about leadership as everybody, but positionally isn't something that stays with just the leaders.
Sure. So if I think about the companies that we do this with, we always start at the top. We always start with executive level. We turn if we can galvanize the C-suite, game over. Because then they're going to be going to their directs and from a place of credibility showing this. And we'll do trainings that will start to scale across workforce. I mean, T-Mobile, we ended up going across 8,000 people in a few months, and it transformed their utilization and in the 20%, not the 80%. Then there's the conversations around leadership. How do we start to have different standards for what we expect? I think when I think of leverage, I think of three forms of leverage. There's execution leverage. Can you get it done? There's leadership leverage. Can I hire you to lead people to get it done? I actually think the most valuable form of leverage, Gaurav, is thinking leverage. Can you do the independent thinking so that I don't have to do it? Because if you need to come to me to do your job, now I am actually doing your job. And AI is a huge asset here, because then, like, when people come in to my office with a question, I'm going to ask them, did you write crit? If the answer is no, get out of my office. Love you, but you're trying to give me pieces of your job. And if you need me, then I don't need you. So go do it without me. Write crit. Show that you have harnessed and leveraged your assets first. Then bring me the situation. Help me understand what you came up with AI. Now I can coach you on how to take it to another level. When you start to hold those type of standards where AI is an expectation, not a suggestion. When people bring you work and they've not pressure tested it with AI, and you are challenging them, go do this, go write crit on this. Or, I mean, I now have the ability, because I see color instead of black and white, I can see the systems that they can build out where I'm going, wait, great example. The guy who was running sales for us, I promoted to be our president. He had to backfill his position. I asked him, how are you going to train the person? And he said, oh, I've got my scripts. We're going to role play. I'll sit on some calls. I'll look at the conversion data and we'll kind of go from there. And I went, no, you won't. And he goes, all right, you clearly see something I don't. What are you thinking? I'm like, don't we use an AI note taker for every single thing we do? Yes. Don't we have conversion data on every single prospect? Yes. Well, how about we create a project where we have it pull the last 100 sales calls, pull the transcripts into a project, have it cross-reference it with your sales script, and also pull in your conversion data, and then write a crit where AI is going to help us create an even better sales process that it will turn into a skill so that whenever a salesperson has a call, we can create an automation where that transcript gets run through the sales coach and it compares it to the standard and sends a Slack message to the salesperson telling them what they did well, what they didn't do well, and the top changes they need to make in the next 5 minutes before their next sales call. Because I can see color, I can see that inside the company. That might have been over a lot of people's heads. Cool. You know how you start? Once a day, every day, write crit in a strategic way. You will naturally start to see color instead of black and white. You will naturally start to see all your systems differently. You will naturally start to see how you solve customer problems differently. Start with you.
One of the things I want to talk about to sort of the start with you piece, right, is and then the scaling bit is from a transformation perspective in an organization, what are we seeing as being different? Because the question sort of, given our work that we often sort of get asked is what's different about AI versus other tools, other technologies, et cetera, from a change perspective. And I think there are four things that probably are a little bit different. And some of what you're saying is sparking for me some ideas around how to address some of that, right? So one is the speed at which it's moving is just different. So it's sort of, I cannot think of a time where a technology has changed and evolved and gotten better as fast as AI is evolving and getting better. So that's different, and we have to get our heads around that. The other is it has a long tail on behavior change because it isn't, hey, I did it once. Oh, that crit thing that I heard about from Geoff, I used that one time. And now I've baked it into my process and it happens every time. No, I've got to keep using it. I've got to keep, right? So it's a behavior change that has a pretty long tail to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's unfortunately a lot of anxiety, I think, around AI at the moment because one, it's new, it's changing, it's disruptive, it's right. But then there's also just the sort of the conversation has gone to a place of replacement rather than augmentation and enabler, right? So I think that's not helping. So we've got high levels of anxiety to deal with.
Yeah.
And then the final one is it is easy to start to use it. It is hard to use it in a way that starts to get you value. Or if hard is not the right word. It's not necessarily hard, but
Most people aren't.
there's less out there around how to use it to get value. There's a lot around how to write a better email. There's a lot around
Yeah.
how to create a better looking slide deck, right? And so people start to use it and go, oh, okay, great, I'm using AI, right? But they aren't actually getting the value out of it. So I think if I think about those four sort of challenges, one of the things I'm reflecting on as you're sort of describing the experiences is when you start to think about it as a skill, right? You start to think about it as developing a skill. It actually starts to help you address some of those because you go, all right, if I'm developing a skill, well, one, of course, I expect to continue to have to improve that skill. So the behavior change piece, yeah, of course, it's going to be a long tail, right? If I start to think about it as a skill, then the sort of anxiety starts to go down as well because I'm developing my own skill sets around how to use this. And I think it starts to bridge the gap, of course, between the usage versus value. So I do think the sort of framing of AI as an enabler of a skill set
Yeah.
has some real traction to help reduce some of the angst that organizations are feeling around
Yeah.
AI.
I think I genuinely believe that the humans in your business are one of your greatest assets that you may or may not be fully utilizing. Let's say a human, you put $1 in, you get $2 out. Why would you want to stop that investment? AI creates the potential where you could put $1 in and get $10 out or $100 out. So when I look at people in a business, I do not look at this and ask, how do we cut heads? Right now we happen to be in a time where the public markets are rewarding companies for publicly saying we are reducing headcount and it's because of AI. I think a lot of it is show. I think
Mhm.
a lot of it is because they overhired and they're using AI as cloud cover. I don't know really of any company that is doing that well with AI and that it's paying dividends in the long term. When I look at a human, um, there's a great book called 10x is easier than 2x. Here's the high level idea. If you want to double your revenue, double your market cap, double your personal income, you can keep doing 80% of what you currently do. You only have to change 20%. You can double. But if you want to 10x your revenue, 10x your market cap, 10x your personal income, you have to stop doing 80% of what you currently do. Focus on the 20% you currently do that drives 80% of the results and reinvest all that other time in new levels of skill. When we look at a job that a human is doing, 6 out of 10 jobs that exist today didn't even exist in 1940. And if you study technology throughout history, what you realize is jobs are just skills you apply and processes you follow. Every technological disruption in history made the value of certain skills and processes skyrocket in value, and the value of certain skills and processes plummet in value. Once upon a time, you know what a really valuable skill was? Being a scribe, writing down things with pen and paper. Printing press changed that. Once upon a time, it used to be really valuable to carry fire around the streets and light oil lanterns on fire. Then electricity came around. AI is just changing the value of certain skills and processes. Here is the problem. Most people are still operating like industrial workers. If we go back to the Industrial Revolution, John D. Rockefeller said, we don't need a nation of thinkers, we need a nation of workers. He invested the equivalent of $2.3 billion in today's money to reshape the public education system so that when kids graduated, they had the skills required to work in a factory. Here's the problem. Education stopped teaching kids the value of skills that were unique to humans and started to teach them the skills that were more unique to the value of machines. We stopped acting like humans and started acting like machines. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Show up to work on time, take direction from a boss, do something repetitively with minimal error, with maximum efficiency so you can deliver good results, get a promotion, make more money, and one day live a good life. That's the world we still live in today. We are literally acting like industrial workers. Who's better at acting like a machine? A person or a machine? Now we
You
have
know,
machines that can do it better. So if that goes away, I get that scary. What's left? It's what makes you human. Isn't it interesting? It might be a machine that returns us back to our humanity.
you know what's maybe worse and more optimistic is it's not just the skills, right? As you're describing this, it's the same thing is true of our management practices. All our management practices were designed with the idea of you've got a few people doing the thinking and then you've got a bunch of people doing the work, right? So whether it's how we think about strategic planning, which is hey, we formulate our strategy with a few people and then we get everybody else to execute it, whether it's how we think about talent management, I mean, any of these practices, right? And then similarly, from a culture perspective, we sort of got to this, well, we need a strong culture in an organization so that everybody feels the culture and knows what to do based on the culture, as opposed to, no, we don't need well, maybe it needs to be strong as well, but more important than strong is adaptive because it needs to reflect what's happening in the context and evolve with what's happening in the context. And so, a lot of our work is around how do you build that adaptability? Well, it's those three things. It's the skills that you described. It's the culture, which has to be sort of an adaptive culture to allow for those skills to flourish and grow. And then you need to blow up some of your management practices and rethink operating models within organizations because otherwise their intention with what we're trying to do with creating this level of skill set. So I think the optimistic part is we have the opportunity because of your comment about, look, the machines are better at being machines. So great, let's get them to do that and let's focus. We have the opportunity now, I think, to really rethink how organizations are designed and how we think about life within organizations, to really sort of create much faster moving, much more adaptable organizations that
Yeah.
can deal with, frankly, what we need to deal with now, which is a context that is obviously so much more chaotic and volatile.
I will tell you, it all comes down to asking the right questions. And I would write this down for you with your people. You or your people can ask, how can AI replace me? And I'm confident you can find answers to that question. But what if you asked a better question? What if you asked, how might AI make me irreplaceable? I bet you can find answers to that question as well. As leaders, our job is not to have the answer. Our job is to ask the right questions. Let's make sure we're asking questions that not only lead to a better business, but also better leaders and better lives, which is the core part of the stance that we take.
Yeah. Yeah. And a key part of that, in a very tactical way, as people start to utilize AI, is to get away from viewing it purely as a productivity enhancement in the sense of an hours and an efficiency play, but to view it as an enabler of,
Yeah.
growth and strategy and effectiveness and sort of all of those other parts of a business other than just
Yeah.
hours and efficiency.
Can I share another real use case to tie some things together? Early on, you talked about speed. I believe the real problem is that companies are not currently structured to move at the speed of AI. You can be using this yourself. You can be identifying operational use cases. You can be putting it into product or service. But until you can align, make decisions, and execute at AI speed, you never fully harness the capabilities of the technology. Let's talk about that word alignment, because even everything you just said, Gaurav, like alignment on culture, alignment on agency, alignment on new ways of working or execution. People will resist adopting a technology they are afraid of, and nobody likes to be told, do this. People want a voice. They may not get a vote, but they want a voice. I have found myself asking, like, how do most companies drive alignment? And I think for most of us, we've all been a part of the offsite where we got in the room with Sharpies and sticky notes. One person talks at a time, loudest voice dominates. The smartest ideas may or may not even be spoken. The challenge with this is there's way too many ideas, not real alignment. And because the loudest voices dominate, not everybody actually feels heard. Maybe the smartest ideas weren't even invited into the room. It's just not practical to pull everybody in. And the process takes for absolutely ever. We never start with what's the AI use case. We start with what's the problem and how can we harness AI to solve it. Herbalife is a really good example. They are going through a massive transformation right now. The board has approved 6 bold moves that Stefan, their CEO, has promoted in terms of how they're going to transform the company from a classic multi-level marketing company to a true longevity tech company. Instead of sticky notes and Sharpies, we were brought in. This is the C-suite, plus they had the market directors from every single region around the globe in the boardroom. Instead of sticky notes and Sharpies, we architected a prompt with all their company data in a secure instance that we put into what we call a thought partner. Everybody in the room just clicked a button. AI simultaneously is interviewing every person for 20 minutes about where do they really agree with the transformation agenda? Where do they disagree? What are the global challenges that will prevent transformation? What are the regional challenges that will prevent transformation? What are the cultural challenges that will prevent transformation? And then it spits out this detailed report for every single person's thinking. We click the button. AI reads every report and goes, whoom, and collapses it to one. And on the screen in front of everybody, it goes, here's where you're aligned, here's where you're not, and here's what's not being said that people actually think that needs to be discussed. And then it asked a question to the room, and like Alexa, it started to listen. That unlocked 15 to 20 minutes of debate, ideas flying around the room. AI's listening to every word for 15 to 20 minutes, and then it asks a follow-up question to facilitate the meeting. I'm thought leader. This thing's my thought partner. You fast forward by the end of 2 hours, absolute full-blown alignment lockstep. And this would have taken them 6 months. They did it in 2 hours. They then go, how do we get the next 400 on board? The next month, they happened to have a gathering. This was the room where you have 400 of the top distributors. We did the exact same process. They clicked the button, AI interviews everybody, and all of a sudden, it spits out a detailed report where every voice was heard in 20 minutes. The next day, 4,000 people. Here's the point. You cannot transform the organization until you transform the leader. You cannot say we're going to become AI driven and you not do it yourself because you are living in black and white. You've got to start to see color. It starts with just how do we elevate how we think? Because that's one of the most valuable skills that we have as humans that's going to go up in value. Let's harness AI as a thought partner there. But then instead of looking at random operational use cases, let's look at the things that are timeless when it comes to driving enterprise value. Strategy, execution, and aligning your people to execute to achieve your strategy and making technology the foundation of all of it.
That's great. So, what I would like to do, because I think what you've articulated really well, Geoff, is sort of as individual leaders on this call, right? What are the ways for you to start to utilize AI most effectively in your organization, right? And how do you start to get for yourself? Because to your point, you've got to start with yourself, and then how do you start to get some scale? So I think hopefully folks have been paying enough attention and making notes as we go. And like I said, we'll have the recording as well, so you can go back to it. Maybe just before, and we're sort of running low on time here, just maybe a couple of points I wanted to make around from an organizational perspective. If you're thinking about how do you want to start to think about redesigning your organization, what do you need to be doing, right? So a couple of things for me, for folks to sort of be putting in their heads. One is this, we talked about this whole idea of it's got to be an enabler of strategy. Well, that means you've got to actually be able to articulate your strategy. And yes, you can use the thought partner to help you do that, but you've got to be able to get really crisp and clear around what are our strategic priorities, because unless that is clear in the organization, you can't have the acceleration that you're talking about with utilizing AI, right? So there's a piece around articulating strategy priorities, so we know where we want to focus. There's because it is still a new technology and it's still sort of people need to experiment with it to get comfortable with it. You've got to take the deliberate approach, which is a lot of what you're describing, which is the use it in this way, even that sort of cascade you just described with Herbalife, right? That's a deliberate approach in my mind, and you've got to do that. You've also got to, I think, create a little bit of experimentation, right? Create space for people to go around and play, and that's fine, and play with stuff. And I don't want to be. We've talked quite a lot about this whole like, hey, don't use it for not don't use it. What we've said is it's not so valuable if you're just using it to write emails, but that's okay. That doesn't mean don't do it. It just means recognize that that's what it is, right? That's a bit of experimentation, getting used to it. It's probably still adding some value for you, but it's not going to be the 10x driver, right? So, but you need both. So you've got to get the deliberate strategy moving, and you've got to create some opportunities for experimentation for people to play with it. And then we've touched on this one a little bit, but because the reality is it is creating anxiety. Whether it should or not, the reality is it is creating a high level of anxiety for people in the organization. So as leaders, you've got to figure out your messaging to convert it from a threat to an opportunity for people. And I think a lot of what we've talked about on this should be good fodder for people to, here's how to start to talk about AI. Here's how to start to talk about the value it can create, so that it's starting to move things into an opportunity rather than a threat focus.
Yeah. So, one thing to call out, we've talked about strategy multiple times. Every company has a strategy. Whether or not people know the strategy or not, I'll ask that question, because usually it's like something that sits on the PowerPoint on the CEO's computer. But do people actually know it? Probably not. Strategy is your future competitive advantage. How do you know if that is sustainable and defensible in an AI-driven world? So when we start working with companies, we'll turn the lights on for the C-suite in terms of just using this as a thought partner. So they become AI-driven, but then it usually looks at how do we harness AI to unlock the wisdom of the leadership team, as well as the data of the information of the world, to identify the AI-driven business that's going to put you out of business and what it would look like if you built it first. How do we figure out what are your internal capabilities that are valuable, rare, costly to imitate, which are the raw ingredients of your strategy, and where AI will amplify them versus undermine them? That then starts to list out like what's your strategy for the future. Then we go to execution. What is your business plan? There's no AI strategy, there's just business strategy. Then what's your business plan this year? What's the 20% things we need to focus on that will drive 80% of the results toward you occupying that moat in an AI driven world? AI is going to be in there. Then we look at people. How do we now use this to enhance our people to better execute the business plan in alignment with our strategy? That's it.
Yeah.
It sounds simple. Doesn't mean it's easy. It sounds simple.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, right? Because strategy for me is not the deck that describes our business plan, right? Strategy is it is what are our unique strengths that we can apply, and what are the assumptions we are making about the world, right? And the distinction I want to draw there because I think it's really important. It's not forecasting. It's not what's going to happen in 3 years because frankly, no one knows, and we are terrible as human beings at predicting the future. But it
Awful.
is, what are the assumptions that are underpinning the decisions we're making, right? So we are, one that's hyper relevant at the moment for lots of organizations who are capital intensive is interest rates. You made assumptions on what long-term interest rates were going to be and built a strategy off of that, right? Now, when that's no longer true, what does that mean for your strategy? And so being able to articulate those assumptions and the strengths of your organization is what allows you to then do what you just said, right? To say, okay, now let's assume for a second someone's, either our assumptions were wrong or somebody's going after those strengths. What does that look like? And then how do we start to build
Yeah.
again? So
Yeah.
we've only got go ahead, Geoff. You got a
Can
reaction.
I give people just I'm going to give you the simplest thing you can do from here that can just legitimately change the trajectory of your results with AI. I want you to grab two sticky notes and a Sharpie. I know I said sticky notes and Sharpies were dead. They're very valuable here. On sticky note number one, right? How can AI help me do this? I do not want you asking what's the AI use case because that's you having a solution looking for a problem. Whatever you are doing in the moment is the problem or opportunity, and asking how can AI help me do this triggers the use case. Then context, role, interview, task is the prompt. And I'm telling you, I personally live this. I have had these two sticky notes on my desk for years. Some of my most valuable use cases came because I looked down while I was reviewing my financials and saw the first sticky note that prompted me to write a crit that blew my mind on AI's ability to give me the strategic things I needed to focus on based on my financials. I now have a full-blown AI CFO that has pulled out 20 hours of financial analysis every single month. It has delivered so much financial value to us. It's insane. It started with two sticky notes. Get them on your desk, then once a day, every day for the next 30 days. Write crit in a strategic way. You just write crit once a day on a 20% for the next month. Game over.
I love that you used capital letters on your sticky notes because that's how important it is.
That's right.
We unfortunately, well, maybe it's fortunate because it's been a great conversation. I've sort of run out of time for too many questions. So what I might do is rather than trying to rush in a question or two, I'll give you a moment, Geoff, in a second to have the last
Sure.
word. But we will collect those questions, and like I said earlier, we'll circulate something afterwards in response to those. I do want to say thank you very much for joining us. I think it's been tremendously useful for people to hear from you. So I appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversation. And I'll give you the last minute if you have
Yeah.
any last insights you want to share.
I, in terms of taking this forward, one, buy the AI driven leader for your team. I see 5 posts a day on LinkedIn from people I don't even know talking about how they shared this with the team and it changed their life. It will absolutely work. Check out our website, aileadership.com. We have a newsletter that is for leaders who don't read email, and they all read it because every week we're giving you real use cases you can deploy. It brings a lot of value, and you can learn more about the trainings we do for the executive teams or the alignment sessions that we drive. But I think those are great places to start.
Super. And folks, you will have Geoff's contact information and the link to the book, etc., in our follow-up as well.
Shoot
So
me a
you
message on LinkedIn, say you were on this. We'll be friends. We can be besties.
Fantastic. Thank you, Geoff. Thanks, and thank you everybody else for joining us. And have a great afternoon or evening wherever you are. And we will speak soon.
Amazing. See you all. Thank you.
Cheers.